Egypt is an emerging track and trace regulation, but again, another one that the Ministry of Industry and Population, that many of the stakeholders have been working on, been thinking about for the past at least 3 years. And that's, I say that's usually the standard gestation time for a lot of these regulations to start thinking them through. It covers all pharmaceuticals. We expect that there will be some exceptions at a certain point in time, but those have not been really clearly documented. This is another barcoding and serialization and master data and traceability reporting regulation. I think one of the nice things is that GS1 Egypt has a very close relationship with the Ministry of Industry and Population and with many of the stakeholders. So the ministry takes a lot of, if you will, advice and guidance from GS1 Egypt. So we see that, for example, in the set of regulations for serialization and barcoding. It follows the standards fairly closely. The mechanisms for aggregation will follow that fairly closely as well. The compliance reporting, that's a little bit more of a challenge, and you'll see why in a minute. Deadlines. I can't tell you what the final deadlines will be. I could flash up previous circulars from the government that laid out 10 to 12 individual deadlines that were published in 2017, 2018. But this has taken longer for the government to organize than they thought, than we thought, and many of the other stakeholders thought as well. A little bit of a picture of what this looks like. Like I talked about for many of the other countries, this is an end-to-end traceability system. It's meant to capture information about medicines that are packaged and then introduced into the supply chain. And then as products move through the supply chain, when products are shipped, when products are received, when products are returned, products are dispensed or used, to capture information about those medicines and report them up into the government system. And there is a centralized Egyptian system that I'll talk more about in a minute that will capture all of that information and make that information available to the ministry and other stakeholders. One of the things that we do early on when we're trying to guess what the regulations will be, guess what the guidelines will be, is really to understand what the ministry, what the government is trying to do. Because depending on sort of the checklist of what your goals are, then you're likely to say, okay, they're going to try to capture this kind of data, or these kinds of events are of interest and these kinds of events aren't. Here, certainly anti-counterfeiting is a really important piece in protecting patient safety, but also supply chain efficiency is really important for the ministry. They feel that there's choke points in the Egyptian pharma supply chain, and they feel that a track and trace system will help in the governance of that medicine supply for the ministry. So the current state of Egypt, this is something that a day doesn't go by, a morning doesn't go by when I don't have conversations with either somebody in Egypt or many of you about what's happening there. So there were original deadlines in June of 2018. The government system was not ready. There were no published guidelines, so that got postponed. It got postponed to June of 2019. Obviously, we have not met that deadline. The government has not come up with a new set of deadlines. Well, part of that is because the technical guidelines are not finished. So that has not been able to inform the final regulations. It's not been able to inform the final timelines for those. So no firm dates on the compliance deadlines for Egypt at this point in time. No firm dates on when the final technical guidelines will come out with Egypt. Now, what I will say, though, is that Egypt will happen. There's huge desire within the industry to make this happen. As you saw, there's huge desire from the President Sisi, to improve the drug supply. That's why they created the Egyptian Drug Authority. So to me, this is one of these not if, but when things. I think it'll happen fairly quickly. The industry has been providing guidance, input to the various stakeholders and saying, give us some reasonable lead time between when you publish the final technical guidelines and when you put the first deadlines in place. One of the things that the Ministry of Health and Population has said in several meetings is it's really important for the ministry and for the government to get it right. It's important to have a well-designed system. It's important to have really good adoption in supporting that well-designed system. So they're very concerned about doing it well. And that's why they've been very cautious about making public statements and setting anticipation and whatnot.